might be my most prolific year at the LA Times in terms of everything that I wrote about, everything that I covered.
I think we know why he's
the awards, proclamation for Congress, I was kicking ass in 2024, and yet I find myself completely uncomfortable. As much as I resisted even just having my name out there first on anything, the reality is I kind of run out of places to hide. I keep next level. There is no next level for me. I've worked at basically every major newspaper, every major television station, and I've worked in all the major cities. The next level is just me. I've built a career looking at the intersection of sports, NBA gets it right, culture, because you wanted to check my black card, in politics. I see it as a reflection of this will continue to be an extension of that.
If the money's no good or the location.
To find a comedian who believes that,
Welcome to the LZ Granderson Show. Welcome to the LZ Granderson Show. I am your host, LZ. Today is Thursday, July 24th. And whoo, boy, do we have a great conversation for you right now. First, let's talk about Pablo Torre. Give that man his flowers. He broke this tremendous story about the NFLPA scandal. If you haven't heard it, go to his podcast. It's called Pablo Torre Finds Out. He really breaks down a lot of different aspects to things that have been going on, not just within the NFLPA, but what appears to be some sort of collusion between the players' union and the league itself. And that's the part that we're focused in on. There's a lot of other salacious stuff going on in terms of murky hiring of personnel, strip clubs, and who's picking up the bill. I was really fascinated with the need for a double parking space size, apparently. But this conversation that we're about to have with George Atallah, who was the Assistant Executive Director of External Affairs for the NFL between 2009 and 2025, meaning he was basically the media's mouthpiece for the union during all of that time period. So he's navigated through a lot of controversy, including the Colin Kaepernick scandal, including the drafting of Michael Sam. We talk about, obviously, what happened with 2020. He was the mouthpiece for the union through all of that, and he left in 2025 when leadership switched over. It is the first conversation he's having with anyone in the media since this scandal has broke out, and we spent a lot of time talking about the collusion aspect of it because he was the person speaking on behalf of the union during the controversy with Colin Kaepernick as he was trying to get back in the league, and there seemed to be no team in the league that was willing to have him try out. So you don't want to miss this conversation that we're having with George Atallah. George, my friend, thank you so much for taking time to talk with me. It's my understanding that not many people from the NFLPA are talking to many people in the media, so I'm very grateful for you trusting me with your story here.
I appreciate joining you, and hopefully I can attempt to make sense of some of this and offer some people some hope and explain why it's important.
Okay, well, let's start from the beginning, right? Because there are going to be a lot of people listening, watching this who don't fully understand who you are or how this story ties into anything of your tenure. So let's start back to 2008, shall we? And the former great NFLPA ED passes away from pancreatic cancer, correct? And that sort of leads the way to your entry into the NFLPA, correct?
Yeah, pretty much. And when Gene Upshaw died, and I know this from spending countless hours with my former colleagues and players who cared about Gene very much, it was a traumatic event for the union, and they had a very deep sort of soul searching at that time as to what direction they wanted to go in, what their leadership was going to be like. And it was traumatizing, right? I mean, many of the staff and players who were close to Gene shared with me that they went to bed one night thinking they were going to come to work as a normal work day, and the next day Gene was gone. And how that really impacted that time, especially during a time in history where the financial crisis was going on in America in general, but the owners had opted out and signaled that they wanted to lock out the players, right? So you have that right. Sort of all of those things converging on the union at once, and there was a real sort of fear that they weren't going to be able to get things back on track.
And so they land in 2009, March 2009, on D. Smith. And the first person that he hires is you. Why?
I mean, look, looking back now with a little bit of wisdom, I can say honestly that I just went into it with full heart and full soul. And I knew, didn't know much about the union other than Gene passing away, and, spent my career mostly in corporate sort of America doing the thing on agencies and at Goldman Sachs and places like that. Didn't ever expect to be in sports, but I dove in 2 feet first. And I think that energy and that fight, I think, really carried the day just as much as expertise. I mean, look, LZ, there's a lot of people out there who have incredible expertise around public relations and media relations and social media and digital content and all that. And I think the thing that I made a push for and that Dee really saw in me was fight and spirit and courage to do stuff and be creative and push the envelope to try to make sure that these players felt like somebody had their back. And that's how I always tried to carry myself through my job was, wasn't always perfect, but every touchstone was, how do we have the players back in this moment?
Some of your greatest hits, if you will, in terms of your work there, your time there?
It's hard to sort of point to one specific thing, but in reverse order, I'd say getting through a COVID season was a Herculean effort by the team. And I use the word team very intentionally because to run this union effectively, to run any union effectively, it's never about one person. Yes, you need leadership. Yes, you need dynamic people at the top of these organizations to sort of help carry the day and drive a vision and drive execution. But without a team of people, none of the stuff, you name it, COVID, the 2020 deal, getting through the 2011 lockout, fighting the owners on Bountygate, getting through some of the individual player cases and commissioner discipline that we did, health and safety advancements. We haven't even gotten into some of the medical research and former player benefits. All of those things are not tapped to one person, right? It took a team of people who were dedicated to service, dedicated to the mission, and really felt like they had a seat at the table to make a difference. I'd say that's the hallmark, was finding the way to integrate all those things and really use them as leverage to get the things that benefited players in the long term.
So to be clear, in terms of your role with the organization, you were basically the player's biggest advocate publicly, correct?
Public, yes. The public space was my primary role. External affairs, if you will, was how we dubbed it. But really managing, if you will, the stakeholder management and communications in the public realm was my primary role. Yes.
So, given your prior role with the organization and understanding the scandal that it currently finds itself in, how would you summarize the way communication has been handled, both by the NFL, but also the NFLPA, since the news has broke?
Well, I think everybody's a little terrified and a little paralyzed and traumatized by all this. I wouldn't expect the NFL to say anything. Frankly, they're on the other side of the table, and they're probably scratching their heads on one hand going, I don't really know what to make of this. And on the other hand, I think you've seen instances where NFL owners are starting to gear up and take advantage of things. I mean, Mike Brown doesn't say what he says in the public about one of his own players without rebuke if you have a strong and functioning union there to sort of smack it down. From the union side, look, it's a lot of soul searching. I feel for those guys. I feel for the players. I know they're under a lot of pressure, and I guess my one message to them, LZ, is I sort of will share this with them when we're done, is don't shrink from the moment, right? I think people need to hear your voice. This is your union after all. I find that the tragedy of this whole thing is we spent most of our careers doing our best to get players involved and making sure that this was their union. And we can unpack some of the stuff in the process of 2022 and 2023. But when they finally got to a point where they took ownership of it, and I don't want them to see one person or one mistake sort of let them shrink from the moment or squander it. And I hope that's not what they're going through now.
What was the red flag for you? You know, Pablo did a fantastic job on his podcast, kind of going through the timeline, beginning with 2022. And that happens to also be the same year that D. Smith announced he was going to step down. He gave the Player Association 3 years to find his replacement, but it began shortly after, 2022, where Pablo sort of begins his investigation. Where were the red flags for you in terms of when you think about how this story unfolded that perhaps the union missed? Whether during your time or after your time?
Yeah, I mean, look, I was a bridge between 4 union presidents and 2 executive directors, and our team took great pride in ensuring that each president was set up for success when they entered into the role as a player, because most of the time the players shoulder that burden. And then when DeMaurice left into Lloyd, I again did what I did, which is threw myself at Lloyd's success, did everything I could to help him succeed. The first red flag I saw was his comments on 18 games. And to be as direct as possible, look, that to me was a sign that yes, we're all for people doing things differently. We're all for change. Getting a fresh look at the union was something that candidly I wanted, and I shared with my team that it was time for us to sort of get a look at things in a different way. But the 18 games comments were tough for me. We had spent,
Why was that so difficult for you, considering you were the union rep or mouthpiece, at least publicly, when the 17th game was entered? What was the difference between the 17th game and the 18th game?
Because we got ahead of the players. 17 games was something that was radioactive, and we learned from those mistakes, or we tried to learn from those mistakes of, look, if there was a breakdown in communication and some players say they didn't know, then what did we do wrong? And I think we had to take a really close look at examining what our communications were like around that 2020 CBA. I mean, look, ultimately it passed, and you can see now with the growth of the league and the salary cap going bananas, I think, I don't mind saying it's a tremendous deal for the players. And I'm really proud of the collective bargaining agreement that we signed in 2020. We wouldn't have gotten through COVID if we hadn't gotten the votes for 2020. That's first. But the 18 games thing, we've been fighting that off since 2006. I mean, one of the things that the owners wanted to do when they initiated a lockout in 2011 was try to force through 18 games. And for an executive director to both get ahead of the players, but also publicly cede ground on that before we had a full-blown collective bargaining strategy, that was a red flag for me.
And so did you feel compelled to say anything, given all the years of battle wounds and scars that you have in these battles? And if so, was your advice taken?
Yeah, I mean, we said something, LZ.
Who's
we said something. I did, members of our leadership team did, and we said something. And I think you saw a course correction there at the New Orleans Super Bowl, where one of the first things the executive director said there was 18 games is off the table, right? So there was a course correction that happened. I suspect, because I had already signaled that I was moving on at that point, that course correction was coming from the players, which was awesome. Again, players, take control of your union. This is about you guys. But no, early days, that was a topic that we definitely went over, and I know it was discussed in painstaking detail.
So that's red flag number one, that maybe the union's not in good hands. Did you have any idea about the impropriety? Like, I don't want to get onto the salaciousness about strip clubs, but if my new boss had expanded a parking spot and dedicated to someone who's on trial for murder, I will be sort of like, I don't know if this is the spot for me.
I mean, look,
from home, I don't need to see this.
There's gonna be time where we could find some more comedy in that, but I just right now find a little more tragedy in it. And there wasn't like a single character flaw, or this is not intended to be some sort of character assassination. And to your point, LZ, like the salaciousness stuff is going to get the headlines, but I really want the players to understand that there are still people out there who want to fight for them, and they need to find leadership amongst themselves to sort of do a very strong introspective look as to what went wrong so that they can get the next decision right. So yeah, I mean, some of those things are kind of funny. The parking spot thing, it hadn't occurred to me that it was even painted 32 there. It was just, I didn't even, it's quite a nugget, honestly. But yeah, at some point, look, on the character stuff, Lloyd's going to have to make a decision as to whether or not he discusses these things or not. I don't want to put words in his mouth or be a part of, sort of a continuation of beating him down. Like, that's not what this should be. I really want to spin this forward and look at the players and offer them encouragement and hopefully a roadmap for what they can do to put things back together.
It sounds as if, I'm new to this politics thing, but it sounds as if you're lobbying for yourself to make a return.
No. I mean, look, I will always love
not even temporary, not even to bridge, as they look for someone more permanent, given your background, given the battle wounds that you've taken on behalf of the union.
They're always going to have my number, and I'm always going to be there for them. I love the team I'm building. I love what I'm doing now. I think the agency that I'm building and the advisory work that I'm doing with the team that I have is phenomenal. I love going to work every day. I'm always going to pick up the phone for the players. And
did you apply for the job the first time?
Yeah, of course I did. I applied for the job. I thought I would be a great leader for that union. I thought I would be a tremendous asset to the NFLPA, and I thought I would be a great fighter for the players. I didn't have all of the check the boxes that I think that they were looking for, right? In terms of having run an organization before, or some of the business or financial things that were on paper for the person they ultimately selected. But I believed in my heart of hearts that I was the person best qualified to fight for them. And that's why I applied. And I even told players during the course of the process that even if I wasn't the person in the end, I was still going to be there for them. And I feel pretty strongly that I stayed true to my word.
When did you know you were one of the internal candidates, and when did you know you were no longer being considered?
Well, the application process was open through December of 23, right? So I applied at the end of the year. I had conversations with DeMaurice Smith, told him I was going to apply. I had conversations with JC shortly, like the day before, that I put in my application to make sure that, they were cool with it. And just to let them know that I was going to apply. I went through the process, provided.
What was the response? I'm sorry, just curious. When they found out that you were going to apply for this position, did they say, great, go for it? Was there any sort of hesitation? Like, can you recall what the response was?
Yeah, I can. I mean, look, JC, to his credit, was very neutral. He had a process he was leading. And so it was a very brief discussion. I said, look, this is why I'm doing it. I wanted to give you, the president, a heads up so that we don't get sideways, and just know that as a person who's applying for the job, and I don't even like to use the word candidate because it's a job application, that I was going to continue to fulfill my duties in my day job just as hard as I was going to apply for the position. With DeMaurice was a slightly different conversation. I think his headspace was in a different place where he was happy for me. He encouraged me to go for it, but he also outlined the challenges and real pitfalls for what the union was going to face sort of in the next generation and the next fight. And so he looked at it more from you sure you want to do this type of world. But it was good to get both perspectives so that you kind of have a gut check of what you're really getting into.
So when you applied and you saw that the transparency that you experienced firsthand wasn't the same sort of transparency that you were experiencing, a decade later, what did you think in terms of the search process?
I can only tell you how I was treated. and what my experience was. And look, I was committed to helping the players no matter what happened. And what I mean by that is if they decided as a group of player leaders that they were going to keep the process tight, that they were going to keep it confidential, that they wanted to approach it in a certain way, it's their union, LZ. Like, I was on board to support that effort. I think, obviously, in retrospect, looking back, hindsight gives us all sorts of opportunity. Like, let's roll the film and see, right? Let's do some film study and see what happened. Like, I think there might have been moments where they could have let some air out of the balloon on the process, right? But I can just tell you what my experience was. I believe that I went through the process, again, with my head held high. I made the best possible presentation that I could. I met with the executive committee in the spring, shared to them what my vision was for the future, and again, committed my future to the institution no matter what happened. So that's where my head was at. It's their, I keep repeating this line, it's their union. And I think they really are in a moment where they can't look at the mistakes that happened and shy away from decision making. That's what leadership calls for: making tough decisions and having people around you that can scaffold to help you sort of figure out, like, if you did get something wrong, where can you plug in?
Pat McAfee suggested that the union needs a bulldog. And you've already outlined that, Demora's kind of asked you, double take, you sure you want this fight, coming ahead? What do you think, if it's not going to be you as a temporary bridge, if it's not going to be, anyone else that we're talking about, what does this union need in order to handle, let's just face it, an opponent in this group of owners who are really willing to, do whatever it takes to win? And winning sometimes means on the field, but in this conversation, it means off the field.
Yeah, and again, let me be clear. I'm doing this interview not to lobby to be an interim or to put my name in or anything of the sort. As I said, my phone is always open to the players. I've fielded countless calls from active and former players in the last month, and I'm always going to be there for them. The goal here for them is to find somebody who can do some triage, who can, and candidly, it might not just be one person. It might have to be a team of people, because the organization's gotten so big now where it's not just the union and it's not just Players Inc., right? Those two pillars that have historically been the foundations for the Players Association. You now have one team partners. You now have other unions that you're intricately tied to. You're now part of a broader labor movement, where one of the proudest things I did was plug us into the AFL-CIO and help establish a sports council of a brother and sisterhood with other sports unions where we're sharing information. So you're not in a vacuum anymore where one person can just sort of take the reins, oversee the whole thing, and then it's not like Wolf in Pulp Fiction, right? You might need a couple of wolves. You might need a couple of people to come in and help. So I would say the type of person needs to have fight and soul and spirit as much as expertise, and give them a sense of trust and support, give them a sense of having their back. Those are things that I find that are the intangibles right now that I think they could really use. And my hope is that they find that person or people who can help them get through this really tough phase.
You keep saying people, and the first thing I think of is the phrase is the buck stop here, not the buck stop amongst us. So there still needs to be one person, who's the face. What sort of face do you think they need? Do they go back to like what Gene was, which was a former player? Do they go back into the courtroom and look for a corporate, lawyer like Mr. Smith, or do they need something else, someone more tech savvy because of the impact of streaming and how content and IP is going to influence content generation and revenue going forward?
Yeah, LZ, I think I hate to say it's a combination of all, but they have a short-term problem. I rather look at it as they have a short-term problem of getting them out of the wilderness. right? It's been reported that there's all sorts of issues and people having their eyeballs into the union. And I think they have a short-term problem of let's stabilize the institution. Let's make sure that our daily operations are continuing, because there's all sorts of stuff that happens behind the scenes that are crucial to players on a day-to-day basis. Injury grievances.
Clearly.
Right, right. So all of those things operationally need to not just continue, but need to be at a level of excellence and support to the players so that it remains sort of invisible to the players. No gaps there, right? So that's step one. Let's stabilize the institution we love and care about. And step two, spinning it forward, there's not going to be a collective bargaining agreement negotiation until 2031 or 2030, but the deal expires in 2031. What type of leader do you want for that? And it could be a tech savvy person. It could be a media rights person. It could be somebody who has financial acumen and can use creative tools to leverage the current war chest into something bigger. Could be all of those things. I go back to intangibles have to be there, and the soul and heart of a union leader. You look at the great ones, right? Like Liz Schuler at the AFL-CIO is an incredible mentor and friend to me, and she's a person of the people. She's on a bus tour right now going to visit communities that have been hit by all sorts of things that are happening in our country. She has the soul of labor, and somebody who has that heart and soul to bring to the place is something that I would look to first.
Let's change gears for a second, because, much of this conversation has been about the current scandal, but one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you is because you've navigated previous scandals. And so you sort of know a little bit of the lay of the land that's happening right now. So the first one that comes to mind for me is Colin Kaepernick, and it's multi-tiered. Number one, once you have seen these exchanges between owners in terms of what appears to be a coordinated effort to suppress guaranteed money, you begin asking yourself, well, how else have they used or communicated in this way to reach a unified decision on something that perhaps they shouldn't be unified on, like Colin Kaepernick being in the NFL? When you look back in that time, are you confident that what you're reading now through Pablo's reporting in terms of guaranteed money did not happen with Colin Kaepernick and his return to the NFL?
Well, the only criticism or wish, or if I had to replay it back, that I wish Colin would have done was not settle with the NFL, because then we would have known the truth, right? And I think my wish for Colin was, your fight is everybody's fight, and we all rallied behind him. And I know some people took shots at the PA for not doing enough to stand behind him and all that stuff. But when you look at the track record, we prevented a rule from happening. We stood by the players. We helped establish so many things that players are doing in social justice. We had the players back and Colin's back through that. Now, were there certain boundaries that our union couldn't cross? Absolutely, and we can talk about those.
What were they?
Well, we're a labor union, right? And so I think when we talk about going, and our union president went after the president of the United States in a statement publicly many times, but you have to have a commitment from everybody that social justice was going to be part of our community, and we pushed that forward. Frankly, even though some players weren't always fully on board with that approach, right? But again, for Colin specifically, LZ, I wish he didn't settle with the league. We would have known the truth. We would have had probably a decision that we could have all looked at and said, they colluded to keep him out, or they didn't. And that to me was still one of the biggest questions I have from my tenure there was, we can all sort of point to it, but we never sort of got affirmation that it actually happened.
the frustrating thing for me as both a fan and at the time I was a co-host for ESPN's Sports Nation. So we had conversations about Colin Kaepernick quite a bit. And I was always frustrated with the former players who suggested he was being kept out of the league because of his play, because he was no longer as good. Even as we watched other talent or talentless players hold positions for seasons after season after season. I'm curious from your position, because you were the mouthpiece for the union. Was that frustrating for you? Was that beneficial for you to have former players saying, hey, he's not as good as he used to be, as a rationale for why he wasn't in the league?
I couldn't understand it. I was frustrated by it. And it goes to it's a microcosm. That experience, again, and I can point to several others, is a microcosm for why saying solidarity and being in solidarity, the gap between those is incredibly big, right? And you have to be able to, use the old sort of jargon of get everybody on the same page. But the union, especially this union, with a disparate membership that constantly turns over, and you have people who are in the media, across the media, who are, getting paid for their opinions. And that's great. They're doing that. That's great. You have a post-career path. It's phenomenal. You're on radio, you're on TV, all that. But to have a unified message is incredibly challenging. And it's incredibly challenging when you're tested, but it's also incredibly challenging when you have an issue that you're trying to get people aligned on. And again, you asked me about some of the biggest successes we had. We were aligned on so many things through our tenure, or we had to do it with smoke and mirrors.
One more Kaepernick question. You mentioned the settlement and your personal disappointment. Was it a universal disappointment, or did you, come to the consensus as an organization and saying, hey, this is the best option because the other could have a prolonged financial implication, because you're fighting a juggernaut here in the NFL ownership group?
We were fighting a juggernaut, but that's what we took pride in. We were strong enough to fight the juggernaut. And a lot of the fights that we took on, Colin and Brady and Ray and all the individual cases that we took on, were less about the fight for the individual player or the precedent. It was about setting the table that we were in a position and strong enough to fight them, right? The history of our union is we didn't have a players' Inc. and people didn't take salary. And, you had union lawyers who were almost like doing it out of the goodness of their heart, showing up to work every day and trying to find a behemoth that was literally kicking them out of buildings. They didn't have office space for a long time. So I think when we took a stand and people asked us, well, why'd you litigate, or why'd you fight, or we took criticisms for going too hard at times, it was primarily because we had to show the players that we had enough leverage to be equals at the table with owners. And so the Kaepernick situation, I was personally disappointed. I don't know. Again, you'll have to ask my former colleagues or people as they take different positions if they're willing to talk about it. I personally was disappointed because I felt like, okay, man, let's prove it. Let's prove it. You have the receipts. You either have the receipts or you don't, and let's prove it.
Did he ever show you anything? Did he ever show anything that gave you confidence, or was it always from a distance?
We knew enough that there was fire behind smoke. Now, that's easy for me to say now, 10 years later, right? But I had the sense, I had the feeling that there was enough there.
Well, you mentioned 10 years later, something else happened 10 years ago, or around 10 years ago, and that was the drafting of Michael Sam. And Michael Sam, for those who don't recall, was the first openly gay player to be drafted into the NFL. He never made it to Sundays, for a variety of reasons. But one of the things that I know from my own reporting over the decades, George, is that basically every single former professional athlete, especially in the NFL, told me one of the main reasons why they would not come out is because they were afraid of losing their jobs. And I had always believed that there will always be one owner that will take a chance on you if you could really play. And what this reporting from Pablo has done is kind of changed that worldview for me, because there clearly you see, with the conversation with Arthur Blanks, for instance, not being willing to extend a hand out to see if Lamar Jackson, an MVP, a two-time MVP at the time, was available to play for his team out of this solidarity among the owners. Well, then why wouldn't they say, hey, no gay players in our league, and that's just the understanding, and that's just what it is, regardless of talent?
Yeah, I can only speak to how I walk through life, and that's open, willing to accept people for who they are, transparent about values and principles leading the way. I tried to demonstrate that every day that I went to work, and accepted players and their families no matter who they were. I think we're also in the position where we're not hiring and firing players, and you have a far more diverse set of people in locker rooms than people expect. And so attitudes change, and you're in a very obviously male dominated macho type sport in locker rooms. And my hope is that more people are going to be comfortable just being who they are. And you're right. I think if owners are willing to sort of keep Cap out of the league and collude on money and do all these things, is it possible that they have certain worldviews or certain political views that make it radioactive? Sure, but I'll give you an example. One thing that strikes me about these team owners. So, shameless Arsenal fan here, okay, in the Premier League, and the same group that owns Arsenal Football Club obviously owns the LA Rams, right?
Hmm.
So Arsenal has an incredible commitment to equality, pushing diversity. They even promote their gay gooners group, right? And so I look at the barrier to openness and community building and diversity, not just in a vacuum where like it's, the big bad NFL is doing it. I think you have to have community of people step up and say, this is the principle and values that we're going to promote. That's much harder to do in America at the moment, but I'm pretty happy to say that one of the reasons why I wanted to build something in this new advisory was to lean into those principles and values and accept that, look, I'm an immigrant kid myself. I mean, I wasn't born here, and I have to be able to translate and communicate why it is that I'm proud to be an American in this moment. And I think that's something that every team, every sports league has to grapple with. It's not out of the realm of possibility, but people have to be intentional about it.
I'm not one who believes in purity tests. It just isn't my thing. I believe that if you have purity testing, you don't have people. But with that being said, you had to be cognizant of the fact that some of the people within the ownership group supported policies that are negatively impacting immigrants, both in the past and currently.
Absolutely.
How did you manage working for an organization where that was a constant cloud hanging over some of the money that was circulating?
It's simple for me, and I'm going to tell you a story that I shared with my colleagues. So, and this is going to be a slight flex, but bear with me.
We're here to flex, man.
Good. So part of the, I'm a weekend warrior basketball guy. Okay. So I hoop from time to time. I still hoop. My wife hates it. I come home, I'm like, can't walk down the stairs the next morning, but I love it. So when President Obama was in office, I got invited a couple of times to go play. And I had the chance to have like a couple of very sort of cursory conversations with him as I was trying to figure out like how hard I was going to go play hoops against him, right? And his message to me around some of this stuff, because I was grappling with like, man, we're out here defending some actions that are indefensible, right? Like domestic violence. It was like the height of the domestic violence stuff in the NFL, or the publicity around players having domestic violence, even though I knew that most of our guys were not that. And he said to me, kind of a Belichick thing, which is do your job and do your job the best you can. And so the way that I sort of channeled that was I show up to work, I fight for the players, I fight for the principles and values that our institution and our mission believes in. I try to push the envelope and be creative where I can. And then sure enough, when you get to a moment like Trump telling players they're all going to get fired and Colin's going to get fired, right? You now have a touchstone where your job matches your principles and values. And so that's the message that I sort of give to people who are interested in building a career around service, around mission, around purpose, is you have to start by doing your job. You have to start by having a plan. You have to start by executing a strategy that can get you to where you want to be. And that's just like how I approach things. There's no purity test. You have to be able to win hearts and minds and show up in an authentic way. And I keep going back to that word, fight for what you believe in your own way.
Are the players fighting the way they used to? 2020, ushered in an era in terms of player and athlete activism that we hadn't seen since the late 60s, early 70s. And it's been pretty quiet on this front thus far, particularly as it comes to immigration and what's happening within stadiums around the country. Are you surprised at all at what is somewhat of a muted response from the athletic community?
I mean, a little bit. I think people are scared, and I'm not sure people are ready to go full Jon Stewart with the FU song, I guess.
Or full South Park.
Oh, yeah, or full South Park from last night's show, I suppose. I think people are still fighting or still confused about what they can do. And small actions go a long way. Small community building. Having conversations with people that don't look like you and I, reaching out and talking to people with different political views. I think small things go a long way. I'm not sure I'm surprised by the sports community not being more vocal about this, because as we've now experienced, the president has used sports as a polarizing way to get his message and rally his base. But I think we all kind of have an obligation to show up every day to build community, to convey the principles and values that we want to be a part of. Sports at its best, not just entertainment. LZ, you know this. Sports at its best is not just entertainment. We don't just turn on the TV to watch the next great goal or watch the next touchdown or see the next dunk. It's not bite-sized TikTok. It's believing that there's a community that we're a part of that's bigger than ourselves. It extends the way that we look at competition and excellence and values and teamwork and all the words that we all want to aspire to. And I just want sports to continue to be something more than just a transactional entertainment vehicle.
Last question for you. Actually, last series of questions for you that kind of designed to be rapid fire, because it wouldn't be an NFL conversation if we didn't talk about next season.
Let's go.
Number one, who do you have winning it all?
I think Buffalo breaks through this year.
Really?
I think Buffalo breaks.
What's the difference maker for you? Disappointment or maturation?
I think maturation. I think they've been so close, and Josh having won the MVP in a way, I think takes pressure off. It's an interesting way to sort of look at it, but you got the individual award now, go out and play and go win it. I think Buffalo gets over the edge this year. On the other side, I think if San Francisco stays healthy in the NFC, I think if San Francisco stays healthy, they can make a run. And I now that I'm on the other side of it, I guess I can go back to be a Giants fan, but come on.
New York Giants?
I grew up in Queens.
Listen, everybody feel bad for Russell Wilson about what happened with the tweets and the text messages and stuff, but you don't have to do all this now. This is a bit much. This is too much.
I grew up in Queens. What do you want me to do?
All right. You're on the record with that one. Next question for you. The Detroit Lions have just lost their top two coordinators. Can they repeat last year's magic, or is it back to us being Detroit again?
Oh man, I feel for you guys, man. It's tough out here for a Lions fan.
It's tough out here, period, man. But yeah. The thing that's crazy though, man, is that, and you know this, all my time in LA began, and interesting enough, it began the year that the Rams moved back to Los Angeles. And so I was watching Rams games in the Coliseum before they had big SoFi. So I was on the ground floor of the return, and I saw Jared Goff rookie's year, and it was awful. I'm not gonna lie. It was not great. But one of the things that I also remember is that I was there for Colin Kaepernick's last win. Colin Kaepernick played in the Coliseum.
Yeah, it's tough out here. Go ahead.
It's tough out here, brother. In the Coliseum, and it was around Christmas holiday, and he had beaten the Rams on like a last-second run into the end zone, and I was present for that. And I didn't think that was going to be his last victory, or much less his last time in the league, but it was. But I said all that to say I saw Jared Goff early. And out of all the things that I remember about Jared Goff is him not stepping up in those moments. And I just kind of knew deep down inside that with everything going right for us in Detroit, he wasn't going to have his best game.
You're tough on the dude. I mean, yeah, look, it's much different when those bright lights and that playoff pressure comes. Like that's why I think that's why I picked Buffalo, because they've been there so many times that I feel like they have a formula to get over the top, and Josh in those big moments gives them an edge. And look, that's why Patrick is so incredible, right? I mean, he drags his team to the AFC Championship game every darn year. So when you have quarterbacks that have experienced that moment, and sometimes they need to get burned before they can get over the hump, Detroit's going to be okay. I love Dan Campbell. I think he's going to do great.
That's not what you said at first, George. Let me clean it up now. You said you felt sad for us. You said
it's tough out here.
You said it was tough out there. So don't be trying to give me a pick me up in the end like a corporate sandwich. Criticism.
That's fair. That's totally fair. That's totally fair.
So last question for you. This is so awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, for sure.
Last question for you, and this is going back to your key role with the NFLPA for all those years. It looks as if that the 18th game is going to come regardless, right? Because they still have the option to say, hey, we're just not going to have a season if you guys don't agree to this, right? And if that's the case, how do you as a union sell that when you've been fighting that since you said since like 2009? If they get the 18th game, then what are you getting in exchange?
Everything we learned about the 2020 deal was that players weren't happy with the fact that owners got their big thing, and we got like 50 incremental things. Okay, so the challenge we always have as a union is they're looking at one or two big things, more games and more money. And as a union, we're looking at just top line, more money, more benefits, better offseason, health and safety, post-career retirement benefits. It just like the list just goes on and on. And within those broad categories, just within benefits, 401k increases, HRA increase, pension increase. The rest of the country's going away with defined benefit plans. Ours increased. Those things don't show up in a big headline of union wins 17 games, right? Or wins 50% of revenue. The challenge is going to be coalescing players around what's the big win? What do we want to get? And what do players want to get? So going back to where we started this conversation, players, it's your union, and you all have to make decisions about these really difficult issues. And as you prepare yourselves to go into a negotiation 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, who are you going to have lead the way? What team of people is that person going to build around them? And then as player leaders, don't shrink from the moment. All of you have to step up in each of your locker rooms and decide what's best for you.
You sure you're not lobbying to come back for like a couple of days, a couple of weeks? You sure you're not? You ain't gotta.
That's not what this is. Why do you keep saying that?
Tonight, but can you stay? You sound like you haven't left them, brother. It sounds like you haven't left them.
I love them. I love them. I mean that. Like, I really mean that. I hope you could see it translate through the screen. Like, I care about them so much. I care about that institution so much. It means so much more than just, playing game on Sundays. Like, I've met their families. I know their families. I know their concerns. I've seen them through surgeries. I've seen them through taking pressure. And again, last thing I'll leave you with this is, JC Tretter has taken a lot of heat the last 2 months or 6 weeks or whatever it is. I mean,
that's not all he's been taking, but go ahead.
Huh?
That's not all he's been taking, but go ahead.
Well, let me say this about him. You may have seen Jets locker room upgraded yesterday. You may have seen the Commanders locker room upgraded yesterday. Those things don't happen with a president like Tretter. And he's going to speak out on his own. He is, it's not to say that he's free from criticism, but let's keep the criticism in a strike zone that is fair. So for him, who dedicated the last 5 years of his life to making things better for players, I can tell you from working with Kevin Mawai, from Dominique Foxworth, from Eric Winston, all the way through JC. This is not a position that is free of mistakes, and it's not a position that's free from pressure. But all of them had the players' interests at heart, and that's where I'll leave it for JC.
Fair enough. George Atallah, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it, brother.
My pleasure. Great to talk to you.